Welcome everyone to the Transatlantic Roundtable on Human Mobility, organized by Studio Europa Maastricht and Agora Europe. Just to give you a little bit of background on Studio Europa Maastricht, this is a common initiative of the University of Maastricht, the city of Limburg, and the region of Limburg and the city of Maastricht.
And let me also introduce you, Katerina, a postdoc at Maastricht University, and indeed as well current president and founder of Agora Europe, together with Etienne Balibar, who's also joining us today. In a nutshell, I think most of you are familiar with Agora Europe, but still, it is a transatlantic theory on human mobility, which was jointly co-funded at Paris 1 Panthéon-Sorbonne University and Columbia University in 2018. It aims at inaugurating a transnational debate, such as the one we're having today, on the scale, scope, and substance of the European politics space, but and as well to shed the light on specific issues such as migration, unsettlement, forced displacement, and disappearances narratives and counter narratives.
I also wish to thank all of the co-sponsors of today's event. So the United Nations Network on Migration Secretariat, Columbia Committee on Forced Migration, Columbia Alliance Programme, Columbia Maison Française, Sciences Po Centre de Recherche Internationale, CERI, Université Paris 1 Panthéon-Sorbonne. I would also like to recall that Agora Europe was, as Virginie said, a transatlantic consortium co-funded at the Sorbonne and Columbia, and that these partners participated into many of the events, one of which is right behind me here in Andaille. And then the United Nations University UniMerit, thanks Melissa for having joined us, AMREF Health Africa, Italy. This is the first event in which AMREF is also participating as a co-sponsor. And finally, UniMed, and thanks Marcello for having joined us.
And we are delighted to be a sponsor of this important Agora initiative and join with other distinguished panelists today in pushing forward this important project.
The UN Network on Migration, as you may know, is in its second year of progress and development, and as such really considers the role of stakeholders, including researchers, academia, with the linkages to civil society and many other sectors as key partners in looking at how the Global Compact on Migration and its implementation, as well as its current review process in different regions, can be a critical tool in the discussions on the policy topics that you are engaging in today and will continue to do so in these discussions.
But I think that it is more important the role that universities can play on a political level, at national, local level, but also at international level. This is the reason why we are in partnership with other institutions, of course also with Agora Europe, to try to build our position in this issue, looking at the Mediterranean region, not the European perspective only, but this with the idea to give our contribution, looking at the Mediterranean dimension of migration.
We cannot give up because the errants, I mean the exiles or the migrants and refugees do not give up, so they keep trying to save their lives, and they keep losing their lives. And above all, and also, I mean, not above all, but also the activists. This is a wide range of people, from individuals who go to Calais or to Lesbos to invent certain forms of solidarity, to the rescue boats in the Mediterranean or other places, and small and big organizations. They are not giving up, and I find this extraordinarily admirable. So is another European politics possible? I would say that it's important to repeat and hammer as much as we can and everywhere we can that it is materially and objectively possible. A democratic policy of borders cannot be discretionary and unilateral. It is absurd for a continent like Europe, a system of states like Europe, to imagine that it can dictate to entire populations its one-sided concept of the border. This has to be either negotiated or imagined, I would say, in a collective manner, together with people on the other side. And I'm particularly thinking here, of course, of Africa.
The dominant narratives have actually overcome reality. And it is very likely that turning back to reality will bring us closer to level 1, the EU telos. As Jan Patočka would have said, we need to reaffirm the non-evidence of realities. It is the historical human task according to Jan Patočka, who was a Czech philosopher. That is the way in which reality is currently perceived, including xenophobia, discrimination, and the creation of an enemy.
So I'm really excited to be here with you today, very excited to hear and learn from all of you, and stand ready to support your efforts in any way we can. As I said, you know, the Alliance program both supports students and faculty.
Additionally, whereas states have justified derogations from various human rights norms within the migration context with the pretext of national security or public emergency, the right not to be subject to forced disappearance is a non-derogable right within the international human rights framework, which means that states are not allowed to derogate from it even in times of war or states of emergency.
It's important to continue to strengthen links between researchers, public policy makers, the media, and other contributors to the public debates, as it's crucially important that the different actors understand and appreciate each other's primary aims and constraints. So here, more needs to be done to foster a common understanding, which is a vital condition, of course, for the promotion of genuine cooperation between the key actors and a stepping stone for the evolution of a good climate for research-based policy reforms.
Hence, the necessity of a new narrative proposed here in very, very broad, very general terms. A narrative founded on an essential statement. Exile, seeking for a better future and a better economic and socio-political context, are in great part, and again, very broadly speaking, the victims of the economic, of the social inequalities provoked by the huge movement of globalization.
NGOs work as intermediaries. They inform, train the migrants, they promote the rights, they apply pressure on the government of Melilla, they try to promote associations, they make public their situation, they inform about new arrivals and create civil society movements and try to give voices to them.
What of the rights of Indigenous people in places where Australia has extraterritorially extended the reach of its killing law in order to shore up its colonial sovereign borders and white identity at home? An increasing body of literature has emerged tracking the destructiveness of imperial control, both in economic and extractive terms, and with reference to islands being made prisons in the Pacific. These Indigenous voices and perspectives must become central to the discussion on global migration.
Right to mobility, which is defined along the 23 points about global compact, is one of the most unequal at world level, because it depends not, but it depends of the country you are belonging.
So the theme is the addressing fragility to reopen Africa's economy. And how can we do it? Control of the pandemic in the continent depends on a combination of personal and collective public health measures, strengthening of health systems, and attaining COVID-19 vaccination targets.
And I think we would benefit a lot in terms also of efficiency of migration governance for governments, for international organizations, for not-for-profits, and for migrants, of course, and their families. If we acknowledge that migration cannot be controlled, migration can be managed, closing the borders is not only an inhumane or undemocratic measure, but it's not effective. To guard the border, you need two sides, and even more than two sides, actually, because we see the very complex transit networks
that are involved in migration. And you need a multifaceted policy that acts on many fronts.
Why human rights-based and freedom-enhancing approaches trump migration management, a simplification approach? So sometimes data about how public policies work, what the actual implication, the actual impacts are, what specific vulnerabilities exist.
Conscious sentiment and unconscious disposition. As both of these things, xenophobia also informs voting in electoral democracies and not merely mob violence. And it is therefore indirectly a feature of governance.
The focus on repatriations coming from the Commission proposal is not shared by a large number of MEPs. And I think that a refocusing also on the sharing of responsibilities in terms of relocation and sharing of asylum seekers will be foreseen in the proposal amended by the Parliament. But we think we need to open a clear political cleavage in terms of saying it clearly that as it is now, it's only a little step. We need a stronger policy, more integrated. We think we need to go further and include also the economic migration.
The main point of my presentation is to try to understand how different national approaches, US, EU, actually leads to very similar policies, failed policies and negative outcomes for the most vulnerable populations. There are many other NGOs actually trying to protect refugees. They are the key actors for the future. So there is the international instruments, and these international instruments are effectively used by members of civil society. And these representatives are there is the pressure, a bottom-up pressure for collective accountability.
Migrants are themselves audiences and subjected to disinformation campaigns. And they are particularly affected by this disinformation campaigns, especially in the host countries, being a particularly vulnerable population that is very much reliant on social media and their phones to get information. This is particularly true of refugees, obviously, but also not having, in some cases, the cultural or linguistic context. All of this is to say that in our policies and then how we develop discussion and narratives about migrants, we have to remember this type of propaganda, and so never directly address disinformation narratives with the same language, but we have to think about reframing and always using true information, accurate information in a proportion of 2 to 1 with inaccurate information.
First of all, one remark on the importance of fiction in understanding our time of migration. When the history of our time is written, it's going to be a history of migration. It is already being written. And it is very important that that history of migration be also the stories of the migrants as told in the humanities by works of fiction. I would like to insist on the importance of shaping the narrative, and in particular, making sure that about migration, we have a global narrative, a global reflection that goes beyond the simple unilinear narrative of people from the south rushing towards the north.
Have a nice day, evening, wherever you are, and really looking forward to continuing our cooperation with you all. Thank you.